Hey everybody, welcome back to episode 113 of Random Musings from the Clinical Trials Guru. This is also going on YouTube. I'm trying to drive a lot of traffic from YouTube to the podcast and vice versa because I know there's people on both platforms that are just, Kunal, now that you do a podcast, I'm going to formally introduce you. There's so many people that just do podcasts, and I'm on episode 100 something. Recently, a couple months back, I started getting emails from people that are podcast only, had no idea about YouTube, no idea about any of the other stuff. They're just podcasts. So that gave me some confirmation that, hey, I'm on the right track when it comes to just making sure that we're convenient for everybody. Like we're doing a Facebook live stream right now. But the cross promotion too is good. So I'll have a lot of podcast exclusive stuff, like one of the next interviews I'm doing. The guy doesn't want to come on camera, so that's audio only. But I guess it's just be where your audience prefers to be. Like, they'll make it hard for them. So anyways, I've got Kunal Sampat on. He's a project manager from Abbott Labs. He's out in the San Francisco, right?
That's right.
And he's got a podcast, Clinical Trial Podcast?
That's right.
So go to Clinical Trial Podcast, subscribe. You will not find any kind of content from sponsors out there. I've looked. If you find anything, it's just something that's very well polished and like it's almost like a commercial. Like nobody's believing that stuff. But Kunal, I actually listened to, I think, 1.5 of your episodes. I listened to 1.5 of your episodes, and it was really good. The one with Norm, I thought was really, like, you have really good content, and it's great to get the perspective of someone from the pharma company. So people get my perspective as a research site owner, consultant, CRO, startup, but there's nothing out there really from the mouth and the perspective of a sponsor. And so I'm really excited when I heard you launched a podcast, and I think it's really good. I'm a fan, and I wanted to interview you to get your story, to figure out who is Kunal, why would he do a podcast when nobody else in his industry is doing that from the sponsor level.
Sure.
So who are you, Kunal?
Who am I? So that's a loaded question. So first of all, I think I'm super excited to be on your show. So thanks for having me, Dan. Personally, I think I'm a teacher at heart, which is what got me started with the whole podcasting thing. I've been trying to think through like what is like the meaning of life. I think a lot of people ask that, and it's very philosophical, but I want to be in a position where I'm able to help other people from the knowledge that I have gained over the years working in the industry. So I've been with Abbott for almost 11 years now, and before that I used to work for a CRO for a couple of years.
Oh, you did? Okay.
I did, yeah. So I've seen a lot of different things over the years, and I think it's important for, I hear over and over again, like I get messages every day about how people are struggling to break through the industry. And I wanted to create content that will help them get up to speed pretty quickly, or kind of help them regain confidence in themselves. Because as you and I both know, there's really no degree in, clinical trials, or you don't really have there's certification programs out there, but when you're starting off, it's a little harder. And I want to provide those tools to people. And one way to do that is for them to hear people that are already successful in the industry, what challenges they're facing, and then share those insights with others. So that's kind of my background into podcasting. I actually have a master's in nonprofit administration, which is very different because I work for a for-profit company. And as a lot of your listeners probably are working at clinical trial sites, and they may be nonprofit as well, if they're especially at bigger institutions like Yale or Harvard or, for example, because hospitals tend to be nonprofit. So I kind of, I'm keen. I was keen to understand what the other side of the equation looked like, and kind of how to collaborate with sites and make this a win-win. So that was another reason why I started this podcast. And the interview you listened with Norm. I mean, Norm is a champion for sites, and he has a huge conference, the Magi conference, where he's in. There's a lot of sites that attend that. So I wanted to interview him and kind of get that other perspective. So that's kind of what it's in my personal self-interest. I'm interested in learning about other people, and in return, I'm hoping I can provide value to others in the world.
Really interesting. So I think I want to get into the career itself, being a project manager, what your background was, how you got started. I know you shared a little bit about working for a CRO. What did you major in anything in college related to research, or how did you get started?
Yeah, so I always wanted to go to medical school. That was my dream when I was when I was basically probably in 10th grade or even earlier. And then I started I grew up in Mumbai, and then I moved to the US in 2001. I joined University of Massachusetts Lowell for an undergraduate program. And at that time, there was this whole thing about software, and I think software is now back, and everybody wants to, get into programming. But being from an Indian origin, my parents always wanted me to like do what the rest of the Indian kids were doing, which is go to college and study computer science. And I hated computer science. It was not meant for me. It was quite challenging. Maybe I just wasn't curious enough about computer science. I wanted to be in medicine. And then I decided to add another major. So I joined electrical engineering. I was a bit more interested in the engineering side of things. And at that time, I took a course on medical imaging in college. And that got me really going on the medical aspect of everything. And then, after graduation, I joined Parexel working for the medical imaging division. I was like an in-house CRA, analyzing, CT scans and X-rays and, all sorts of images for oncology and arthritis clinical trials.
Interesting.
Yeah.
So when did you graduate college?
2004, December. Yeah.
Me too, exactly. December 2004. Interesting. Okay, so you got a job like right away with Parexel.
Yeah, I would say right away. Yeah, because I joined Feb 2005. So yeah, probably in 2 months.
Wow. Okay. So 2004, I remember that job market really well because I was pre-med, and I realized my grades were not good enough to get to med school, but I still had like an outside chance at like one of those weird schools, like not to put down DOs, but like there was a lot of those kind of schools that were like non-traditional that would consider me. But I wanted like a backup plan, and my dad was in research, and he just started at that time actually as a PI with a bunch of people from USC, and so he's like, hey, you should do this thing called being a monitor. And I was like, okay. So I Googled it, found Quintiles, because they're the biggest. They still are. I don't know what their new name is. Nobody cares what their new name is. But couldn't get hired anywhere because I had no experience. So I realized, okay, CRA, obviously I'm not the right fit right now. Coordinator's next. And so I got that, and then the rest is history because the business was falling apart. I took over. I've shared that before. But yeah, the job market back then, it was a good economy, but so you didn't apply as a CRA. I think if you would have applied as a CRA, you may have had a harder time getting a job than you were more like a medical imaging specialist.
Exactly. Yep. I don't even think I knew what a CRA was back then.
I didn't either, and I was applying.
What was that?
I didn't either, and I was applying to all of them. So,
right.
Yeah, that's cool. And then after that, you got into. So how did you get hired at the CRO?
How did I get hired at the CRO? So, well, of course, I was applying for jobs. So my focus, I was very focused on doing things in the medical field. I didn't want to take my first job to be in engineering or computer science, partly because I don't think I was good at it. And the second thing is that my interest wasn't in those things. So I said I want to use my technical skills into the medical field.
Okay.
So I was focused. So I was only applying to jobs that were related to medicine or integrated with medicine. So I applied for a job, I think at Parkcell and probably a bunch of other companies. I can't, yeah. So, and I just got a call one day saying they were hiring all the fresh grads at that time because
Yeah.
obviously it's cost effective for them to pay somebody $35,000 a year.
And the economy was booming back then too.
Probably, yeah, yeah. So I just took on that job and just got started. Uh, and Yeah, and then 2.5 years ago, I mean, 2.5 years into my role at Parexel, I was there were discussions about me trying to start their office in India. I think we were talking about that, and at that point, I think I was really, I was still way too green. I don't. I remember I couldn't even write emails, and me starting an office for them in India probably was a far stretch goal that I was trying
Hmm.
to achieve. And obviously things didn't work out, and I got frustrated, and they got frustrated, and then I left. But I think I learned so much at a CRO. Like you can learn a lot just by working at a CRO because you get to work with so many different projects, and you
Oh
work with
yeah.
sponsor and all sorts of
And
things.
they work you hard too. So
Oh yeah, it's good.
so let me get your take on this. Maybe you don't want to answer. Well, I don't think it should be a problem because you're at the sponsor level. But I've heard from like 4 or 5 key opinion leaders this year alone
Mm,
that ever since the new GCP updates 2016, where the FDA is mandating the sponsors are more involved in their studies, you probably know a lot about that.
mm,
Um, that the CROs are slowly, and it's gonna happen very slowly because everything in this industry happens slowly. They're slowly gonna get phased out, and sponsors are gonna be more involved. They're gonna bring a lot of the stuff back in house, mainly
mm.
because their vendors have better capabilities now as far as like looking for biomarkers, precision medicine, basically. So,
Mm.
what do you think about that now that we're talking about CROs?
Yeah, so my opinions are not based on what's happening at Abbott, so I just want to make it clear. This
Yes,
is
disclaimer to
my
everybody.
personal, yeah. So I think, I read one of Kevin Kelly's book, The Inevitable, which basically predicts what the future is in the next 30 years.
Okay.
And what Kevin says is, we're going to move towards more like project-based type of engagements as humans. So what we'll do is like, say you and I are working on a project together this month, and then next month once the project is done, the team will be dismantled, and you'll be working on some other project and I'll be working on some other project, which means more of us will be in a more of a contracting kind of an environment, not necessarily like an employer employee kind of setup, which makes
Okay.
me believe that the CROs are going to flourish and in the coming years. I don't think it's going to go away. um, I think some of the redundant activities, obviously, because of technology, things will get automated a lot. I mean, using spreadsheets and manually filtering things, I mean, those days have to end pretty quickly. I mean, we're seeing the end now with there's tools out there that you can use to generate reports and stuff. But
That's
I
right.
think outsourcing is going to be good because I think with outsourcing it gives sponsors, especially you think about it, you don't think about big companies, but small companies. There's a lot of companies that are really small and they don't have the
Most.
dollars.
Most
most
are.
most are, and they don't have the dollars to hire a project manager, a scientist, a data manager, a statistician, everybody on a full-time basis. They just can't afford it. And if they especially have their one drug or device that they're trying to get approved, and there's no guarantee that they will even get it approved, I mean that's a huge investment for them to try to hire all these people. So they're just going to tap into have a couple of people on their side that are going to uh, be at the sponsor side that are subject matter experts, and the rest is just going to get outsourced, the monitoring and all of that. So I don't think it's going to go away. Um, that's my opinion on it.
Okay, interesting. It'll be interesting to see because I'm getting like I'm hearing a lot of your narrative, what you're telling me, but I'm also hearing from the other side that, hey, it looks like maybe the CROs are not going to be like the CROs in 2028 are not going to be the CROs we know today. They're going to be a different type of organization.
Mm.
They'll still
That's
be
probably
around.
true.
The ones that will adapt, they need
Exactly.
to pivot.
I think the CRO pricing model is going to change significantly. I think that's going to evolve a lot in the coming years.
No more marking up.
What was that?
No more marking up.
Well, marking up is fine. I just think it's right now it's too convoluted. Everything is just too difficult. And every time we want to pivot, it just is a nightmare trying to pivot.
So they got to be more nimble, basically.
Exactly. So I'm curious how that's going to all evolve.
Interesting. Yeah, because
Yeah.
when CROs first came out, they were nimble. Pharma was like the big rigid company that didn't want to change, and now it seems like the
The
opposite is true.
reverse.
Like the
Absolutely.
middleman became, we created a monster.
Exactly. I think that's what's going to change.
I think so too, and I'll be here. I'll be ready to take advantage of these opportunities with my boutique CRO. This year's incredibly busy. Kunal, we were talking before we started recording. Are you noticing the same? Like, is this a unusual amount of activity, or is it average?
Well, all I can tell is based on how many messages I get on LinkedIn for job openings. So there's probably a lot of activity happening because people are constantly trying to recruit.
Supply and demand.
Supply
Supply
and
and demand.
demand. Yeah, yeah. But I don't. I mean, I think the demand is always going to be there if you're going to be awesome at what you do.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So I think people need to strive to be great at their work.
But let's
Um,
face it, though. I mean, most people are not awesome at what they do because that would, that statement itself would not make sense if more everyone was awesome. So
mm,
that's the thing, right? There's like very awesome CRAs out there that can get any job they want. There's amazing sites that can get any study, right? But that's like maybe the top 10%. And then you have like the middle 80, and then you have the bottom 10, which in a market
yeah,
like this, even those bottom 10 can get some work.
exactly. But is it our job to help them be in the top 10?
Yes. Yes.
Including us, trying to
Yeah.
be in the top 10.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's definitely graded on a curve. So the more awesome someone gets, now somebody else got to make up for it, right?
Yeah.
But yeah, I totally agree with you. Supply and demand. So let's do something for the sites, and then at the end we'll wrap up with career advice from Kunal, not from
Yeah.
Abbott, from Kunal. But let's talk about sites and site metrics. Something I'm
Mm.
interested in with data analytics, risk-based monitoring. First of all, what do you think about risk-based monitoring? Seems like a lot of the hype has died down. What's going on there?
Mm. So, well, we're still doing risk-based monitoring. I think there's still a lot of confusion on what it means. And, is it, I mean, how does a company or like sponsor or CRO design a risk-based monitoring study? And I think there is that inherent problem of like what type of critical variables are we looking at that we will actually monitor? What is our triaging strategy? Like, what is the algorithm behind which sites will go and monitor and which ones we won't? I think there's still a lot of unknownness. Like, I don't think people are clear like what we're doing.
Yeah.
um, I think the buzz was more around the software applications that will help you with risk-based monitoring, but I think there is a foundational gap still of people like really understanding what does risk-based monitoring really mean. I think all the FDA or any agency wants is they want the population to be safe, and they don't want to they want to make sure the drug or the device actually is not causing harm to people. And the clinical trials are an area where that can happen. So they want to make sure the data is monitored sufficiently so that this doesn't happen. So I think if you just approach it from that angle, I think you could really simplify what your plan will look like. Like you could target high enrollers, and you could change your monitoring frequency based on high enrollers,
Yeah.
or compliance issues. You could have key performance indicators saying late SAE reporting if this happens 4 times or 2 times or 1 time at a given site, we're going to increase their monitoring, at that site. So somehow, like, I think that needs to be done. And I don't know how many people out there are doing this. So I'm still trying to learn some of these things. I actually wrote an article on this risk-based monitoring and like 7 misconceptions that people have. So it's on clinicalleader.com that if you want to put it in the show notes, you could do that.
Yeah. Now, so it's kind of like what I felt when I first heard risk-based monitoring. I'm like, isn't all monitoring supposed to be risk? Was it not risk-based before? Or were we just doing whatever we wanted? I mean, it's always been risk-based. But I think you're right. It's the tools, the data now, like the technology's improved. So I think they're able, now it's a matter of interpreting this data and then integrating it into the monitoring plan. And then adapting that monitoring plan, right? Like on the fly, which is not always easy, like you said. At some of these CROs or sponsors.
If you have a triaging system set up front of the monitoring plan, you could. I mean, I'm just saying generally. I'm not talking about like very complicated trials, but most studies we can have a simple plan that you could say, this is how I'm going to triage my visits. You have a bucket of visits, and then how are you going to spread them? The remote review, I think that's another. It's a completely different meaning, which means the CRA is logging in remotely.
Remote monitoring,
remote monitoring, and that's very different. Remote monitoring than in risk-based monitoring. And I think with the remote monitoring, I think it's definitely at least the way I've seen it, if it involves a conversation with the site, then it's a lot of a burden for the site. Because now they have to be engaged with this CRA who may or may not understand all the nuts and bolts of the study. Because the CRO is probably assigning 40 CRAs to do remote monitoring for all their trials.
You know what they should do? I don't know why they have. Maybe you can answer. Actually, you're involved, I'm assuming, in these kind of discussions internally. We had a study at one of my clinics in Baltimore, and we had a coordinator shortage in the middle of the study, and they actually the sponsor hired a coordinator for us to use mid-study, and they just paid for it, right? And that was a coordinator, like that's expensive. But
it's expensive.
You can hire. Why don't they hire like for these remote monitoring? Because I have a project for my startup CRO. Knock on wood, we're gonna get it. But it's using a combination of on-site visits, but most of the stuff is done remotely. So when you go to the site, you're not doing SDV. Theoretically, that's done. You're just you're doing training. You're looking at IP. You're looking at all the other stuff that you can't do remotely. But you're right. The sites complain, well, hey, we got to upload all these documents. This is a cancer study, so we have like 30 pages per visit. Like, this is crazy. I don't have time. Well, why don't the sponsors hire an entry-level person to do that, right? Like, if that's really the only issue, which that's been the biggest complaint I've heard.
That seems the biggest complaint, No, I agree. So why don't... Yeah, I think so.
So we're using our interns for that project to do that, if we get it. That's in the plan.
I mean, at the end of the day, as long as your interns are following a procedure.
That's right.
Right? I think that's what matters, right? As long as they're following a process that's documented and they're not deviating from a process and you have checks and balances in the process, you could face an audit and say, we follow the procedure.
Okay.
Right?
Yeah.
So that's what matters at the end of the day. I mean, I was talking to somebody the other day and they were like, well, the site has an intern that's doing data entry. And I'm like, so what? What's the big deal if they have an intern doing a data entry? As long as they're following the process and they've been trained on the protocol and what the requirements are and the job that they're doing, they have the skills to do data entry, then why does it matter?
It shouldn't matter, but are you on Facebook? Do you go on there's a clinical research memes group? It's basically where CRAs go to complain and they tell jokes and stuff. But you get a lot of like war stories from the trenches. Like, somebody the other day asked, and we did a whole webinar on this. How many studies is too many for a coordinator? And then you'd be surprised. This is a huge group, like 40,000 people. Some people were saying 30 studies a coordinator, and I was like, that's a ridiculous number. we always do like 5, and yeah, our studies are a little more complex. But one of the things I saw was outsourcing. If a site outsources their data entry, and there was a lot of mixed opinions on this topic from CRAs on whether a site is allowed to outsource their data entry to a third party without letting the sponsor know. Really, they say they're doing it in house, but they're actually having other people do it. I've never
I
done
think that
that.
would be wrong, because I think you want to have like a good paper trail of
Yes.
what you're doing. And I think as long as you've documented in a contract with the sponsor that you're going to you potentially will outsource some of your work, and with the caveat that that individual, that company is going to be trained on your processes.
Yeah,
It shouldn't matter. I mean, I think it's all about having a paper trail.
that's right. Now, walk me through. I wish I could be a project manager for a day. We were talking behind the scenes before the interview about how, I have so much respect for project managers. In my brief stint as a contract CRA working for a mid-sized CRO,
Mm.
very brief, right? Because then I got another contract gig and I couldn't do both. Um, I was impressed with the project. I mean, the workload that this person was doing. First of all, their pay. All right, I was getting paid way more than this person.
Mm.
He was doing at least 10 studies while I was there. Whenever there's an issue from the site or the sponsor or the CRA, he's the one they reached out to,
Mm.
and he seemed like he loved his job. And I was like,
Mm.
this would be hell, literally would be hell for me to do that.
Mm.
I've always wanted to step into the project manager's shoes for a day. I would love to like shadow you or shadow a project manager just for a day, just to see. So can you walk me through like a typical day of a project manager, or are they all different?
Yeah, they're all different, but I'll tell you my day today. um, I mean, I started working at 7 this morning, and you know, I as much as I don't like to check emails in the morning, I'm working on some studies that are based in Europe, and I have to just be on top of a few things because there's very little time overlapping between the two geographies, and you know, obviously there's some fire is burning, right? And I have to align with my colleagues in Europe on our strategy. We're trying to, activate our first site, or are we trying to, is there a compliance issue that we need to deal with? And what's the timeline for that? I jumped on a quick call. We were trying to do things by email. So
Okay.
it was very disorganized, I'm telling you. But as I think the day has progressed, I think things have, like, I came in, I started working on some core documents, getting like strategy in place. So like really having a plan of how I want the study to be executed. And really like having some quiet time. Like this week has been really quiet because there's nobody else in the office. So I'm really like thinking through all the things that need to be done to make the study a success. And then kind of rolling it out to to a group of people, getting their input. Because getting input is very key. I don't make all the decisions myself. I kind of put a framework together and then kind of open it up to other people to basically throw rocks at it and poke holes at it, right? Because I think that's one of the big mistakes that a lot of project managers make. They feel like they are making all the decisions, and then other people are not agreeing with the decisions that they're making. So, kind of aligning on that. Obviously, enrollment is huge. So that's something we monitor like daily to making
Mm.
sure our trials are enrolling. So I think that's probably number one on the list,
Mm-hmm.
enrollment. And then physician relationships with our sites, we really consider that a very important aspect of the job.
The
Um,
PI relationship.
the PI relationship and
So
the RC as well.
what does that
Um,
mean? Because
what does that mean? Well,
yeah.
we don't want the PI to be upset with either the management of the study or the study leadership, either at the CRO or at the sponsor. Uh, if they are frustrated about some sort of glitch that happened, I mean, I think I can give you an example. Maybe there was an SIV, and then the CRA mispronounced maybe one of the drug names, for example. Instead of saying this drug aspirin, they said dispirin. I'm just making it up.
Okay.
And that sometimes could like be frustrating. The sponsor may, or the physician may think, well, this CRA knows nothing about the therapy,
Sure.
uh, and it may see that as a gap. So they'll quickly send an email to the sponsor saying, we had the CRA, they did a really bad job, they didn't know the therapy, and those are the emails that I don't like to receive.
Okay. So what
Because
do you do when you receive that?
so then my first thing is, okay, Dr. So and so, thank you for your feedback. I'm going to talk to the team and get back to you. So then I'm calling the CRA directly usually, or in some cases it depends on what the size of the study is. But mostly I'll work directly with the CRA and his or her management to kind of identify what went wrong, what was the issue, and then how do we rectify it.
Mm-hmm.
So we need to say, if there was truly an issue from the CRA side, then we'll say, I apologize. There was some, gap in training. We've now put together this action plan to retrain all our CRAs,
Okay.
or we've changed the CRA at this site, and now we have a new CRA coming in.
Yeah.
There could be like a variety of different scenarios that would go through, that we would make.
So most of the time, PIs or sites, they get frustrated around a couple of things like screen fail rates maybe are too high or higher than they anticipated, so then they need to renegotiate their budget, right? Or a procedure is taking a little longer than they thought, or in some cases a lot longer than they thought, and they need to renegotiate the budget. It all comes back to the budget. I had one situation where, first of all, every study has different payment triggers, and it's impossible to figure it out. Like, what do we need to do to get payment sent out? In this one study, we had like 3 monitor visits and never got paid, and we were high and rolling. Well, I had to call project manager, not you, somebody similar, at the CRO and say, hey, how come we haven't got paid? This is like 6 months now. We've had 3 monitoring visits. We're still enrolling. We have more. We have yet to get paid. We're putting all the data, blah, 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 right? They didn't know. They got to look it up. And then like, oh, you know what? Our CRA was supposed to do an extra step in the system for you to get paid. She never did it. So, that's frustrating as a site to hear that.
It is.
Because,
yeah.
I mean, this is important. This was like a lot of money. We have payroll, right? And to me, it seems like the CRA either was not trained on that or it wasn't important to the sponsor or the CRO that they do that. But everything else is important, right? Getting those queries answered, database, those are all important. There's no way we're going to miss that. But hey, they need to click this extra button to get you paid. So that's, from my experiences, those kind of things are where sites get frustrated. And I know PMs have to deal with that. So that's like, do you guys deal with that a lot? Like those kind of like payment issues?
I mean, usually by the time it comes to me, it does happen. It's not like an everyday thing. Because we're depending on the team to and we have a separate payments group that will handle it first before it gets escalated to me. But it does get escalated sometimes.
Abbott's pretty good.
Yeah, but then we go back to our payments team and sort out what went wrong. But I agree with you. I mean, the sites do need to get paid, and I think that really the issue with some CROs is the staffing is just not there. So that CRA is probably super overworked, and it's so easy for them to miss a step. And I know it's a big painful thing for the site, but I think giving that other person that benefit of doubt, I think can also be or maybe like communicating during your monitoring visits with the CRA. It's like, hey, can you please check about my payments and get back to me?
Yeah, I mean, in the case with the CRO, with the CRA, if you're the site, you almost have to be hyper vigilant, and I hate doing that, but for that study, yeah, when the CRAs came, you're like, hey, did you do everything you needed to do for us to get paid? Like, I almost feel bad saying that, but you kind of have to. Now,
you have to. You must.
Studies have gotten better lately. Yeah. This was like 4 years ago. I have seen that's been less of a problem.
Yeah.
But it still happens, and I imagine that's where most of the frustration from the sites comes from when it comes to project managers. And of course, you'll have some doctors that, get upset about trivial things. But yeah, definitely a tough job. Hats off to you, project managers out there. Let's spend like 5 minutes on careers, okay?
Yeah.
What would you recommend someone do to get started in research?
So I think I was just listening to a podcast before we started our interview. And I think one of the things you want to do is you want to surround yourself with people that are in research. And it doesn't matter how you do it. So surrounding yourself with people that are in research, you could do it through volunteering at a hospital. And that or you could be, you know, having friends that are in research, meeting with people for coffee or for lunch or for dinner that are in the research industry, like really booking appointments with these people and really not having any expectation in terms of getting a job. So keep the job thing aside and focus on meeting with these people first and figure out how can you provide value to them. So if you're trying to get a job, or if you're trying to get a volunteer opportunity at a hospital, you want to make your approach very personable to that person that you're reaching out to, rather than sending a mass email to 40 people saying, "Here's my resume. I want to volunteer. Make it happen." You want to figure out what type of research studies that hospital is doing or that institution is doing. Figure out what the name of that person is who's running the show there.
Yeah.
And then really, send a personal email saying, "Hey, I saw you guys are doing this. It seems super exciting. Here's how I think I could help. Would you be interested in meeting with me for 30 minutes, either on the phone or in person, to see if I could be of any value?"
That's actually really good advice, Kunal.
Yeah.
Just surround yourself with more people that are in research.
Exactly. Because you automatically get into research just by doing that.
Yeah.
Don't be with people. I mean, I don't want to say this, but don't be with people that want to get into research, because then everybody's kind of like to do this. Because you want to be with people that are already there.
Be with people that's excellent advice. It echoes the advice I got from I had a stint as a realtor, and now I just do digital marketing for them. But we talked to this mega agent, super successful, actually from your neck of the woods, from the Bay Area. Super successful realtor, and my friend and I asked him, "Hey, give us one piece of advice that we could do right now to get more business." You know what he said? Very simple and very similar to what you just said. Talk to more people about real estate. That's it. You're not talking to enough people. Bottom line.
When in doubt, connect.
That's right. Excellent. And now with LinkedIn and all these social networks, you can do that without leaving your house. You can right? So
Yep.
I appreciate your time, Kunal. I know you're busy. Probably got to go put out some fires right now. But where can people find you? Clinical Trial Podcast on iTunes.
Sure.
Right?
That's a great place on iTunes, and obviously on my website, and LinkedIn is a great place.
What's your website?
It's clinicaltrialpodcast.com.
Oh, okay. I didn't know. Okay, good. I'll check it out.
Yeah. So I have some cool blogs there as well for people if they want to read stuff up and not listen to things, or you can do both.
Keep doing what you're doing. It's important. I think it's needed. Like I said, we don't have enough sponsor exposure online.
Sure.
So keep it up, Kunal. We'll do it again. And thank you everyone for listening or watching. And this is Dan interviewing Kunal Sampat from Random Musings from the Clinical Trials Guru. Take care.